Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our mathematics lecture class. And in this lecture class, we are simply going to look at the relationship between the roots and the coefficients of a quadratic equation. So this is part 1. So that means that we are also going to have part 2, and mostly part 2 is all about revision. And for part 1, I normally explain every content of that particular topic. So let's quickly go in detail and look at the relationship between the roots and the coefficients of a quadratic equation. So in this case, we are going to say let alpha and beta. So we are going to say let alpha and beta be the roots of a quadratic equation. So let alpha and beta be the roots of a quadratic equation, So when we state that let alpha and beta be the roots of a quadratic equation, we are simply trying to find a relationship between a certain quadratic equation, and this quadratic equation we can say it is, let's say we have ax squared plus bx plus c. So we are saying ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So this is our quadratic equation, and we can easily simplify this quadratic equation by dividing throughout by what? By a. So when we divide throughout by a, what we are going to have is something which is x squared plus b over a x plus c over a is equal to what? Is equal to 0. So this is what we have, and this particular equation we can simply call it equation what? Equation 1. So we are trying to find how best can we relate the roots to the coefficients of this particular quadratic equation. So one other thing that you need to understand, that this quadratic equation can also be written in another form. Okay, so I'm going to say this equation can also be written as, so this equation can also be written in the following form, which I am going to write down. So we can simply say open bracket x minus alpha close bracket, and then open bracket x minus beta close bracket is equal to what? 0. So when we do that, our next thing is to simply expand this particular equation. We can say x times x is simply what? X squared, and then x times negative beta is simply negative beta x, and then x alpha, negative alpha times x, it is negative alpha x, and then negative alpha times beta, it is positive alpha beta, and this should be equated to what? To 0. So with this information in mind, we can simply factorize a negative there, and we also factorize an x. So this equation can be written as x squared minus open bracket alpha plus c beta close bracket, and then x there plus c alpha beta is equal to what? 0, and this becomes as our what? Equation 2. Now we have two equations. We have the first equation, which is in yellow, and we have the second equation, which is in blue. So what we now need to do is to compare the two equations. Okay, we can now compare the two quadratic equations. So we can simply say comparing the equation 1, comparing equation 1 and the equation 2, comparing equation 1 and 2, we have the following. So when we compare equation 1 and 2, we need to expect the following, which I am about to write. So in this case, let me quickly pick up certain things. So if you look at x squared here, if you look at x squared and x squared d are just one and the same. X squared and the x squared d are just one and the same. But if we pick the second guy, who is this guy here in white, so if we pick the second guy, the guy in white, and we also pick this other guy, which I am also shading white, you're going to say that you're going to find that the x and the x, they are going to do what? They are going to cancel. So we're going to have open brackets alpha plus beta is simply equal to what? B over a. Okay, simply going to be b over a. So if you multiply throughout by a negative, or you divide throughout by a negative, you're going to have alpha plus beta is simply equal to what? Negative b over a. Okay, negative b over a. So with this information, this guy, because this is addition, this guy is known as the what? As the sum. So this is known as the sum of that particular quadratic equation. So once you understand how to find the sum of that particular equation, you can come up with something else which can be the product of that particular equation. So let's quickly look at how you can find the other guy. So if you compare this guy here, the one I've highlighted here, alpha beta, and you compare it to c over a, so these two guys are normally constant. So in such a case, you're going to say alpha beta is simply equal to what? C over a. And because alpha times beta, you are multiplying them, so this guy is known as what? As the product. Okay, because you know that you are multiplying, so these are the product. So these are the first two formulas that you need to come up, or that you need to understand. So from here, you can also come up with another narration, which is trying to now find the quadratic equation where you have alpha and the beta. So you can say if alpha and the beta, if alpha and beta are the roots of a quadratic equation, if alpha and beta are the roots, if alpha and beta are the roots of the quadratic equation, then its equation will be written as follows. So we have a quadratic equation, just like we stated. The quadratic equation we have is ax squared plus b of bx, and then plus c is equal to what? 0, of which when you divide throughout by a, even there throughout by a and throughout by a, you're simply going to have x squared plus b over a x, and then plus c over a is equal to what? 0. So when you have such information, the equation that you can come up with is the following. So its equation for these guys, the equation for that quadratic function, the equation is normally written in the following form. So for the quadratic equation, it's simply going to be as follows. This will be x squared minus open bracket alpha plus c beta, alpha plus beta cross bracket x, and then you're going to have plus c alpha beta is simply equal to what? 0. So this is the equation that you have to know. So this which I've explained here is the same thing which I explained on blue. So one thing that you need to understand is that there are cases whereby you are asked to find the equation of a quadratic equation whose roots are maybe of that particular type. So with this information which I have stated, are you guys do you guys have any questions or not? If you don't have questions, I'll be able to now give the examples. But before you ask me questions, one thing that you need to understand are the following things. So the following things are things that you need to make sure that you know in mind. The first one is the guy whom I'm shading right now. So this is the first guy that you need to make sure that you know. Okay, I think my color isn't showing. Okay, so this is the first guy which you need to know. So make sure that you are able to know how to find the sum. You are also able to know how to find the product, and lastly you should be able to know how to write the equations. So those are the three basic things that each one of us is supposed to be aware of. So with this being said, I don't know if you guys have any questions. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. Yes, Chimuka. I'll start with Chimuka. What's your question?
Sir, it's a request. But I'm kindly asking if you could repeat how we found equation 2.
How I did what?
How we found equation 2.
How I found equation 2.
Yes.
Okay. Alright, let me repeat that. Let me quickly repeat that. So basically here what you have to know is we are making alpha and beta to be the roots of that particular quadratic equation, and the quadratic equation which we are relating it to is x squared plus b over a x and then plus c over a, which should be equal to what? 0. So the next guy, who is this guy? Okay, what you just have to do is you say x minus alpha and also x minus beta should be equal to what? 0. X minus alpha, and then you also put x minus alpha, and then you put brackets, and you're going to say x minus beta. Then you multiply there. You're going to say x open bracket, x open bracket, and then you multiply x minus c beta close bracket. Okay, then lastly you're going to say negative alpha open bracket x minus c beta, and then close the bracket, and this should be equal to what? 0. Okay, so when you have such an equation, your next thing is just to multiply x times x. It is what? X squared. Then x times negative beta. It is beta x. Okay, beta x. Then you move alpha, negative alpha times x. It is what? Negative alpha x. Then negative alpha times negative beta, it is positive alpha beta, which should be equal to what? 0. Maybe the only part which you might get confused is the part where I now had to factorize them. So I'm going to write the x the way it is, x squared, like that. Then since there is a negative there and there is a negative there, I'm going to subtract. Okay, I'm going to factorize, then open. So this negative into negative is positive, there is also positive, but since normally we say alpha beta and not beta alpha, I'll start with alpha. So I'll write alpha plus, because the negative times negative is what? Positive, plus beta open bracket, and then that x there, instead of putting it in front, I'm going to put it behind, then plus alpha beta, which should be equal to what? 0. So that's how easily you can come up with the equation 2. Any questions, Chumuka? Is that clear with you now? Chumuka?
Yes, sir. It's clear. Thank you.
You're welcome. I saw another hand from Frederick.
I think you've made it clear, sir. My question was on that part where you have to factorize negative and x. I wanted to ask if it is not wrong to put x in front of what is inside the bracket there, as in minus x open bracket alpha plus beta close bracket.
Okay, so Frederick, you are always having the same question, and my response is the same. Multiplication is commutative. Sets. Multiplication is commutative and associative. So if you say 1 times 2 is the same as 2 times 1, so whether x is in front or at the back, it's just okay. Is that okay for you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question? Okay, since we don't have a question, let's quickly move on and look at examples. So let's go in detail and look at examples. So I'm just going to solve one example in this particular lecture. The reason is simple. I have solved 3 questions. Should be 3 questions or 2 questions. I've solved them. The first one I solved it from Math 1100. The other one I've solved it from Math 1120. So these 2 are past papers, 2023 past paper, Math 1100 and Math 1120. There is a question which came on this particular topic. I have solved it, and you should check it up on our YouTube channel. So let's quickly look at the example. So the example is, if alpha and beta, if alpha and beta are the roots if alpha and beta are the roots of the equation, so if alpha and beta are the roots of the equation, let's say we have been given the equation. Let me change my color to make it more highlighted. So we have 2x squared minus x plus 3 is equal to 0. So that's the equation we have been given. And then the other thing that we have been given is find the equation. Find the equation whose roots are alpha squared and beta squared. Okay, so mostly this is how these questions are set. So these questions are normally set in this particular form. The way I'm going to solve it is how you're supposed to solve it. Okay, and these particular questions, they come in so many ways. Where you have seen alpha squared and beta squared, sometimes it can be 1 over alpha and 1 over beta. Sometimes it can be alpha squared and beta squared. Sometimes it can be alpha cubed and beta cubed. So the question normally comes in so many ways, but your job is just to make sure that you manipulate everything so that it can suit the formula. I'm repeating that. The question comes in so many ways, but your job is to make sure that you manipulate everything and make sure that whatever you manipulate, they are able to suit the sum formula and also the product formula. So let's quickly start with this one, and I'm going to elaborate more using this example. So I'll write my solution like that. So after you write your solution, what you have to do is to understand the question. So since we are looking at this particular part, guys, follow me. This is a free mark, okay? These are free marks in mathematics, because you know that calculus, you are not going to be 100% sure if you are going to get it right or not right. But these questions are easy questions that can help you to score 40 marks. So from here, what you have to do is the equation we are looking for is the equation which is having x squared minus, where there was alpha plus beta. Remember the second formula was alpha plus beta x, and then plus alpha beta is equal to 0. This was equation 2. This is the equation from the formula. So the equation we are now looking for is the equation which looks like x squared minus alpha squared plus beta squared close bracket x, and then plus alpha squared beta squared is equal to 0. So this is what the formula is. But because we have been asked alpha squared plus beta squared, so what we are now looking for, it is not what we had in the formula, but what we need to have. So what we need to have according to the guideline through the formula, it is something that has to look like this. Okay, now when you have this in mind, what now you need to do is as follows. Follow me properly. What you now need to do is as follows. You're going to write down that equation in yellow. You're going to write down that equation in yellow. So this equation, you're going to write it 2x squared minus x and then plus what? 3 is equal to 0. When you write this equation, you are going to relate it with the equation 1. Okay, this was your equation 2. Remember, this was your equation 2. You're going to relate this equation to equation 1, which was ax squared minus bx plus c, which is equal to what? 0. Okay, so with this in mind, you can say therefore, okay, with this in mind, you can say therefore a is equal to 2, okay, then b is simply equal to what? If you look at b is simply equal to, sorry, there is supposed to be a plus. B is simply equal to -1 and c is simply equal to what? 3. So according to this one, which was our equation 1, from what we know, we've discovered that a is relating with 2, b is relating with -1 there, and then c is relating with 3. You are done with this guy. There are easy and faster way you can do this, and you can watch that when you check the solutions for 2023 exam past paper, the one I've already solved. Okay, so after you do this, your now next job is now to look for alpha plus beta. So alpha plus beta, according to the equation, alpha plus beta was -b over what? Over a. So alpha plus beta, in this case, you're going to get negative, which is independent, plus that negative there on b, which is negative. So this will be -1 close bracket over what is our a, which is simply 2. So alpha plus beta will simply be equal to what? 1 over 2. Just solving this, there is a mark there. After you do that, what is your next job? Your next job is to find the what? The product. So the product is alpha beta is equal to c over a. This is according to the formula. So alpha beta is simply equal to, so you're going to check up what is c. C is 3. Okay, c is 3. And what is a is simply what? 2. So you have found the second, the third information we are looking at. Remember, this is called what? The sum. You have found the sum here. Okay, and then the other one is known as the what? The product, and the product is this one here. So you now have the product and you also have the sum. What you have done here, you have only responded to this section where you are relating these two guys, but you haven't responded to the guy which was relating to the second equation. But before I move on, do we have any question at this particular point? Any question, ladies and gentlemen? Any question? Let's feel free to ask.
You divided the first equation throughout A, but in this one I cannot see a part where everything was divided by 2.
That part of dividing throughout by A was just there to help us to this part of dividing throughout by A was helping us to come up with the formula of the sum and the product. Okay, sum and the product. So I have utilized that formula at this point, whereby I have just written the formula. So if I write negative b over a, and I've written negative 1, which is this one, negative 1 here, and then divide by 2, meaning I've divided throughout by what? By 2. Is that okay, Frederick?
Yes.
All right. So now this is where issues comes in. So here now you're going to get this formula, this particular part. Okay, you're going to get this particular part here. You're going to get this guy, which is alpha squared plus beta squared. Now, this is where people get it wrong. This is where people fail to do and move on. If this thing was 1 over alpha, if this thing was 1 over alpha and 1 over beta, you would have done 1 over alpha plus 1 over beta. Okay, then you work out if that's how it was, until you find a way whereby you can have alpha plus beta and also alpha beta. I'll give this as an assignment, and then I'll solve it later in one of the tutorial videos. If this was cubed, okay, if this was cubed like that, and the beta cubed, okay, you would have found a way how you can find alpha cubed and plus beta cubed, if at all you had the things like this. If you check this one here, this one here came in math 1100. This one was in math 1100. If you check up math 1100 or math 1120, this one is in tutorial sheet and it is in one of the past papers. So make sure that you are able to solve questions that come in such a way. What I'm solving is how you're supposed to solve it. So let's get back and look at what we have been given, so that we will be able to understand and pick up one or two things. So we have alpha squared plus beta squared. Our job is to find a way we can have alpha squared and beta squared. Now, how can we have this particular guy? Okay, here you need to ask yourself, when you reach at this stage, how can you have alpha squared and beta squared? So this is where you can have it. You can simply have this guy by simply expanding alpha plus beta and then squared. If you expand this guy, you can simply have alpha plus beta open brackets, and then you have alpha plus beta, like that. Then from there you can simply have alpha plus beta squared is simply equal to alpha times alpha, it is alpha squared. Alpha times beta, it is alpha beta. Then you say beta times alpha, it is alpha beta, and then beta times beta is simply beta squared. Okay, we have that. Once we have that, we can simply simplify that. This will be alpha plus c, alpha plus beta, and then you have squared is simply equal to alpha plus beta squared is simply equal to alpha squared, and then that beta can come there, beta squared, and then you're going to have this one plus that one, it is 2 alpha beta, 2 alpha beta. So my target is to have alpha squared plus alpha plus beta squared. So I'm going to take this 2 alpha beta to the other side. So when I take 2 alpha beta to the other side, what I'm going to have is that alpha squared plus beta squared is simply equal to, I've just written this first, is simply equal to, this one will go to the other side, this will simply have alpha plus beta, then squared, this goes to the other side, it will be minus 2 alpha beta. If you observe, what I now have is what is according to the formula. If you look at alpha plus beta, it's the same one which is in that formula. If you look at alpha beta here, it is the one which is in that formula. So I am able to find the value of alpha squared plus beta squared by coming up with a way I can find those guys. Now, there are cases where it is a cube. If it's a cube there, you need to multiply cubed until you have alpha cubed plus beta cubed, then you make alpha cubed and beta cubed as the subject of the formula. But in this case, we are not interested in that. Now, listen carefully. We have alpha squared and beta squared. Mostly in the exam, they'll ask you question 1. They'll ask you to find alpha squared plus beta squared. So you move search and then you find what I'm going to find. So in our next stage, what we are going to do is we are now going to find the value of alpha squared plus beta squared. This is how you're going to find it. So you have alpha squared plus beta squared, which is simply equal to alpha plus beta squared minus 2 alpha beta. Okay, then I'm going to write a note here so that you'll be able to remember. Notes. You know that alpha plus beta, according to what we have solved, alpha plus beta is 1 over 2, and alpha beta is simply equal to 3 over 2. So you're going to replace where there is alpha b plus beta, you're going to replace with 1 over 2. So alpha squared plus beta squared is simply equal to, open bracket, 1 over 2 squared minus 2, where there is alpha beta, you're going to put 3 over 2 like that. So after you do that, you can simply say alpha squared plus beta squared is simply equal to 1 squared is 1 over 2 squared is simply 4, and then 2 there 1, 2 there 1, so you're going to have negative 3. From that particular point, you are now going to add these guys. So you're going to say alpha squared plus beta squared is simply equal to you have common denominator, it is 4. Okay, 4 into 4 is 1. 1 times 1 is 1. Then there is over 1, that will be negative 12. So this is what you have. Now when you have such a value, what are you going to do? When you work out this, you're going to have alpha squared plus beta squared is simply equal to negative 11 over t over 4. Negative 11 over 4. Here there is a mark. Actually, this is a question on its own like that. Okay, this is a question on its own like that. But it's just one question when they're asking you to find the equation. So this is how you found. Then remember, we had another guy who is the product. Remember, we had the product. Where is the product? The product is this guy here. Guys, get me right here. I first started with this one, which is the sum. Alpha squared plus beta squared. It is the one which I have found here to be negative 11 over 4. But I also have another duty to look for alpha squared beta squared, which is called the product. So in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to write. So this guy, basically me, when I'm solving, to make sure that I don't forget what I've solved, I'll normally put a tick there because I know that I'll come back for it. So the next one which we need to look for is the product, which is alpha squared beta squared. Mostly the product is simple. So this one will go as you factorize, you say alpha, beta, and then you say squared, like that. Because you know, alpha squared, it is alpha squared. Beta squared, it is beta squared. So after you have such information, which is alpha squared beta squared is equal to open bracket alpha beta squared. When you have such information, you can simply say alpha squared beta squared is simply equal to, where there is alpha beta, you're going to put 3 over 2 and then squared. So alpha squared beta squared is simply equal to 9 over 4. And this one also, I'll put a star there to remember that I need to come back for it. But in the exam, in most cases, this one becomes your A, and that one, this one and that one, they become your A. And then the next one, it is the equation. So when you have this guy, you also have that guy. You now need to go back to the question. The question is find the equation. The question is find the equation. So according to the equation, this is what we have. So I'll write equation. Okay, here now I'm responding to the question. So I now need to look at the equation. The equation is x squared minus alpha squared plus beta squared cross bracket x, and then you're going to put plus alpha squared beta squared is equal to 0. So this is the equation that I need. Now from this equation, there are things that I have already found. I have found what is alpha plus beta squared, and I have also found what is the alpha squared beta squared. So from here, I'll just pick what I found on my first star. So it's now going to be written as follows. So I'm going to have x squared minus, I have that, so it will be open bracket negative 11 over 4, then close bracket x, and then I'll go and say plus. I'll get my alpha squared plus beta squared, which is this one. So I'll write 9 over 4 is equal to what? 0. So from there now, I can simply write x squared plus 11 over 4, and then x there, and then plus 9 over 4 is equal to 0. So this is the equation you have to find, and we have simply answered the question. So this is the answer. For my friends who are smart enough, and who think they'll have enough time in the exam, you can go as far as this. So you can say x squared plus 11 over 4x, and then plus 9 over 4 is equal to what? 0. And then you multiply throughout by a 4 to get rid of a 4 down. So when you multiply throughout by a 4, this will be 4x squared plus 11x plus 11x plus 9 is equal to 0. So for those guys who will have enough time, you can go there. So both are answers, just that this one doesn't have fractions, but leaving your answer there, it is also okay. So this is the answer to the question which you have. So at this moment, I will allow you guys to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions, and I'll be able to respond. Questions, please. Okay, so for those who might want to ask in my inbox, you are free to WhatsApp me on those two lines. The Airtel line is not through for the course in the meantime, but you can call my MTN line, but both of them are on WhatsApp. So please, you can WhatsApp me on those lines. But in the meantime, for those with questions, feel free to ask me right now.